A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
All right, well, huge breaking news out of the Middle East. It has now happened after weeks of failed nuclear negotiations that were clearly going nowhere, as well as a massive U.S. military buildup across the Middle East. America, in conjunction with Israel last night, officially launched major military strikes against Iran. And we're not talking this time about a limited operation, right? This is not a single strike on a nuclear facility or ballistic missile production. These do appear to be large-scale attacks across the country, directly targeting the Iranian government with the expressly stated goal to be bringing down the regime itself. And I thought going in that Trump basically had two major options if he was going to use the military. Option A would be to try another limited strike to essentially make a point and hope that the government would then come to the serious negotiating table. Or option B would be for Trump to simply flip the table over and say, I'm done with dealing with this. You've had enough chances. And especially coming at a time when this regime is arguably at its weakest, right? Its major proxies have been wiped out and decimated across the Middle East. Domestically, they're dealing with the largest anti-government protests that they've arguably ever had. The calculus might be there. Now's the time to act on this. Now's the time to move. And it does appear that Trump has chosen option B. So it's unclear what comes next, but it's definitely going to be something very significant, right? This is not like before. And that said, let's get into all of this. And look, normally in these videos, I sort of am giving the news and my opinions concurrently. It's free flowing, but I will say in this video, I'm going to start by breaking down the news and then giving my thoughts and full analysis, because I will say, I do think this is a complex issue that requires a nuanced breakdown of it. And my guess is that the coming online discourse on this is going to be extremely toxic, emotional, and impulsive, right? And so I don't necessarily believe that this is World War III or the Iraq War 2.0, nor do I believe that there aren't any valid concerns to be had. And so I'd like to actually break this down with all the complexity that the issue actually deserves. So that said, let's get into this, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you're subscribed to the channel down below. We greatly appreciate the support. And that said, let's first of all start with these details. It appears again last night, massive strikes across the country, particularly targeting governmental sites, including the heads of state, right? I believe the president, the supreme leader, at least where they're staying, was targeted, Iranian parliament building on top of that. Take a listen for yourself.
There are unconfirmed reports that Iran's defense minister was targeted, as well as the head of the judiciary. That would be significant because the head of the judiciary would have delivered many death sentences, thousands of death sentences to protesters over the years. So it would be logical that he would have been a target. But what's clear, Griff, from these initial strikes is that this is an attempt at regime change. We've talked in recent days about how broad would this mission be? Would it be only the nuclear sites? Would it be the nuclear sites plus the ballistic missile storage sites, which Israel was very concerned about and had pressed the U.S. to include as part of the targeting? Now it is extremely clear that this is a targeted, the strikes are targeting Iran's leadership, including the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who Lucas Tomlinson was reporting took power over 37 years ago. He took over in 1989. He's the longest serving leader in the Middle East, and his compound was targeted in the early hours, in maybe even the first strike that took place. That is symbolic and that is significant. And you heard the president appeal to the Iranian people, saying that this moment is a moment moment in history that you should seize after the bombing stops. He appealed to them to rise up, and he said, the hour of your freedom is now. He said, stay in your house until we are finished, but this is the moment that you can take over your government and seize power. That is significant because we weren't sure that this was going to be a regime change operation, but it's very clear from the initial set of targets that that is exactly what it is, Griff.
Yeah, so again, this does clearly seem to be option B when you look at heads of state, government facilities being targeted. Now, who knows if at the very last minute, the Iranian government is in the bunker right now, suddenly trying to sue for peace, right? Saying, okay, fine, we get it. No nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles. Although the chances of that, while maybe non-zero, are rather unlikely, in my opinion. And you did hear Trump in his speech following up on this, openly making a message to the Iranian people, basically saying there, first of all, as it pertains to the Revolutionary Guard, to Iran's armed forces, now's the time to stand down. If you revolt against your government, if you lay down your weapons, you will be given immunity. But if not, hey, America's coming for you. This is happening. And likewise calling on the Iranian protesters and people themselves, saying, look, now's the time to finally topple the government. This is your chance, encouraging them to take to the streets and go seize on that opportunity. Take a listen.
To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms, you will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all.
So there you have it. Clearly, this is option B. Clearly, this is an attempt at regime change. Although I will say, I think it is interesting and noteworthy that Trump really explicitly calls on the Iranian people to rise up and take their government. Because you're going to hear a lot of, cries out there that this is obviously Iraq 2.0. What are we doing? He said no new wars. But that's why, again, I said the nuance here is important to listen to, because I think what Trump is clearly indicating is that America's goal is not to, say, invade Iran and topple the government ourselves as we did in Iraq. What he's basically saying to the Iranian people is, hey, this has got to be from you. The regime change has got to come from the people. America's going to help out. We're basically going to provide the air support from the skies and strike the government facilities, take out a lot of their government and military infrastructure. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is not about a boots on the ground, full-scale invasion. At least that's what it's sounding like he's saying at this time. And I think that's actually backed up by the military buildup that you see in the Middle East. Because in the weeks leading up to this, if you were following, actually, a lot of U.S. troops on the ground, right, our ground soldiers were evacuated from major military bases in the Middle East for strategic concerns there. Rather, the buildup that you're seeing is entirely naval, right? We basically have an armada. And so just the logistics that you're seeing, right, the people you're seeing that the U.S. is deploying, the way we're using our military clearly indicates that this is intended to be aerial, right? Because if you're going to do a ground invasion, then you have to have troops on the ground. We actually pulled the troops on the ground out. So that's some nuance here. That's very interesting to point out. I think that one could argue Trump is almost trying to test the waters of this. He's like, okay, we're going to strike Iran. We're going to heavily cripple them. Let's see what the people do next. And so that appears to be, right, what is happening. Now, that said, let me break down now, finally, my opinions and thoughts on all of this. And let's try to be as balanced and as level about this as possible because, on one hand, you have these people who scream Iraq 2.0 about everything that the U.S. military does. They scream World War III anytime anything ever happens in the world. They're usually wrong, by the way. But at the same time, I'm not calling for a return to 2003 George Bush neocon politics, and I certainly understand why people would have valid concerns about that. So, what are my thoughts? Well, I think it's, first of all, good to start by asking the question, does this benefit America in any way, right? Does America have a real strategic interest in doing what we're doing and trying to topple the Iranian government? And my answer there would be yes. I know some people would say no. They're going to say it's just a war for Israel. It's just another Middle East quagmire. I think specifically in 2026, especially given that fact, the answer is yes. And my answer there has a lot less to do with, say, Israel or typical Middle Eastern affairs. I actually think this is very different from Iraq, and much more to do with, say, the global power struggle, which is especially something that actually didn't exist in 2003. And what I mean by that is, let's be real. What is this really about? It's a proxy war between America, China, and to a lesser extent, Russia, right? And that is the global power struggle. You can sit there and pretend as if it's not happening, or the world is really dominated by, I don't know, just democracy versus autocracy or these sort of ideals. But no, let's be real. America basically is an empire in some way, shape, or fashion. Maybe not the traditional kind, but it is. It's constantly, and by the way, as human beings always have, it's constantly fighting with other powerful empires basically for control over trade, shipping, influence, etc., military, etc., right? And when you break down sort of what the top allies are of, that other axis of, say, Russia and China, I mean, it's not that complicated, right? It's well known. Their two top friends in the world outside of themselves has been who? It's been Venezuela and it's been Iran. And what just happened in Venezuela. And so if you tell me, hey, when it comes to the global power struggle and the fight for America to keep its hegemony over the world, which is actually a net good for Americans in a number of ways, right? If you're going to be an empire, you want to be a powerful empire, you want to be a successful empire, you should be rooting for your empire to succeed, right? So if you told me, okay, in the span of a couple of months, you would see the two top most influential allies of your rival basically come down, right? Which leaves them actually sort of in a corner, which leaves them with nothing, which would guarantee basically American dominance over the world for many decades now to come and sort of checkmates our rival empire. Then I would look at that and say, okay, if you can do it quickly, if you can do it efficiently, if you can do it in a way that doesn't ultimately backfire on our country, then the answer there is yes. We do have a strategic interest, right, in making sure the rival regimes of the other side are taken down. So what did we do in Venezuela? We basically kicked China out of our own hemisphere. We said, nope, that's not going to happen. Now Cuba's collapsing. Now the other Latin American regimes are really scared to bring in Chinese influence for obvious reasons. That was a net good for American power. Now in Iran, well, it exists right now in the Middle East that the Gulf states are more so aligned with us, especially after the Abraham Accords. We obviously have Israel, but the kind of base of power, and by the way, where China and Russia get a lot of their oil from is Iran. So likewise, if you can say, well, we're going to take that out in an efficient manner, and the other side is going to be trailing way behind us in this sort of power struggle, then yes, the answer there is America does have a strategic interest. And again, it's not about quote unquote Israel. It's about sort of the battle between the big dogs. Okay. Now that said, this is not to say that there aren't concerns around it and that you're certainly taking a gamble. Actually, I would say that my first and foremost biggest concern is that, well, given how fast America is moving, right? Boom, Venezuela done. Then about 2 months later, now Iran is trying to be toppled there, right? Is actually to an extent, well, maybe what Russia and China are going to do about this. Because if you're either of those countries and you're watching what America's doing right now and understanding you're being checkmated, you're really being pushed with your back against the wall, you're in huge trouble here when it comes to your global power, at what point do they say, okay, we need to step in and do something, right? We cannot allow this to happen. Or is it likewise an incentive for China to say, okay, we absolutely have to move on Taiwan because look how America's moving. We have to do something for our own survival and our own defense here in sort of the global power struggle. Then that's going to be something to watch, right? So, potentially maybe American boots on the ground not being in the equation, which I repeat, I don't think it seems like it's going to happen, is less so of a deterrence for Russia and China to get too involved. But they're certainly concerned about this. And so, they did nothing to defend Venezuela, obviously. Might they think, okay, we have to step up and defend Iran or else we're really screwed? That's a genuine concern to be had about this. And so we'll see what happens. At the same time, if you're them right now, hey, it's worth remembering. Venezuela had heavy military tech from both of those countries, and look how it worked out for them, right? Are either of these countries really in a position right now to seriously challenge America in a proxy war? And if the answer is no, then it's Trump's calculus that now's the time to act. Sure, people might call me a neocon or whatever. They'll be upset about it for a year. But long term, this is something for many decades that's going to ensure American dominance. Then in that case, long term, I'm concerned about legacy. I'm concerned right now with basically securing America's strategic position, which you see, by the way, the same situation and say the Greenland thing and the way he's trying to assert dominance over natural resources and all those things. That might be the calculus there. Now, secondly, of course, it's worth noting that toppling the Iranian government, another legitimate concern to be had, right? Toppling the Iranian government will be more complicated, it is true, than toppling Venezuela. All you had to do in Venezuela was essentially take out one guy, and even the vice president was willing to work with you, basically serve there as your puppet. And so it was a relatively efficient operation. The issue, of course, in Iran is you have a lot more kind of people to contend with, right? Yes, there is the supreme leader, but a common popular myth people have is that sort of there's no other government besides that. No, there's a parliament. There's a lot of people that could potentially fill a power vacuum that are still pro-regime. You have defense ministers. You, by the way, have the IRGC, right? The Iranian Revolutionary Guard there that you have to contend with. They're fanatical. You could see a general or someone from them try to take power. So this is all to say, right? There's a lot of people you'd have to neutralize in order to make sure that the Iranian regime falls. And that's, of course, something that complicates the situation. And then, of course, what also complicates the situation is, well, potential U.S. casualties. And even if we don't want it to become an Iraq war, could it potentially spill out into that? Well, it's worth noting that the last several times we struck Iran, we basically didn't get a serious, meaningful response from their military, right? It was sort of a performative thing to save face. And that was, of course, because seriously, their regime itself was not directly being threatened. Now their back's against the wall. Now they know we're trying to topple them. And so we're going to get the full might in response of what Iran has to throw at us. Is it exactly enough, right? Am I exactly super quote unquote scared of it? No, but sure, US casualties could now become a concern. And so that's also going to have to be something to watch, right? That's why I say there's a cost analysis to this. Yes, it's in our interest. You have to also make a decision of whether or not it's worth it. And so that's going to be something to watch, because obviously if this becomes a quagmire, if this gets way out of control, if a lot of Americans get hit, then that's not going to be a good look for Trump. At the same time, don't immediately rush to the conclusion that that's what's going to happen. I think the other sort of point that we have to raise is, especially after watching Venezuela, after watching Midnight Hammer last year, it seems to me at this current moment in time, when it comes to, say, technology and superiority, the U.S. military is at a relative high as it compares to other countries. And so, look, as I said, that could also be a reason you say, okay, now's the time to act on Iran. Now's the time when we're strong, they're weak. China and Russia's military tech is nowhere near what we have. If we're ever going to do it, now's the time. And so, these are things that obviously have to be balanced. And again, at the same time, I said, I don't think you're looking at Iraq 2.0 for a different number of reasons. First and foremost, that the ground invasion there doesn't appear to be what's happening. But I think secondly, what I would point out, and maybe the difference between this and Iraq, is that it clearly appears first and foremost that the Iranian people are ready for a regime change. I don't believe that that's CIA or Mossad propaganda. I think that's very clear that, the protests did happen, and, their country domestically is falling apart. It is failing. And so certainly this popular sentiment is being spotted. And so while I'm not denying that the Iranian regime has supporters in Iran, I think it has a lot of opponents. And you even saw that this morning in a video of Iranian high school students celebrating and screaming, "I love Trump," as bombs were falling on Tehran. Take a look. So yeah, again, I don't think it's exactly CIA propaganda to say that there is a meaningful proportion of the population there, likely a majority, that wants to see changes in their government, that wants to just live a better life, right? It's a failing state. They're not even investing in their people because they're so busy funding wars and terrorism, right? So people don't like to live in those conditions, and given the opportunity, might seize the chance to try to topple their government. As a matter of fact, we just saw that. Now, again, it's not to say that there's not concerns, because if ultimately the people are unsuccessful and the Iranian regime survives all of this, then you have problems on your hands. So yes, that is an issue, right? But to say that, well, there's no chance of that happening or the people are with their government, I also don't think that's true. I mean, let's not just be like stupid third world simps about this to say, oh yeah, no, everything America does is bad. All the enemies of America, they're so much better than us, and it's just all propaganda, bro. Don't fall for the propaganda. It's not propaganda, right? It's kind of simple, basic common sense. People don't like to live in failed states, which is what you're dealing with there. Now, of course, I'd also point out that the big, really problem, let's be real about this with the Iraq war, was not toppling Saddam Hussein. Contrary to maybe the way you remember it. That part was extremely easy. It was, of course, what came next, right? Is the fact that insurgency and terrorism just rose like crazy across Iraq. And of course, considering this is the Middle East, that's certainly a concern that could happen in Iran as well. At the same time, I would point out, I see that as a far less likely outcome in Iran than Iraq. Let me explain why. And it's first and foremost the fact that ethnically, Persia is relatively united, not entirely homogenous, but there is a dominant group. And it also has a long time history of being a historic country, a historic nation for thousands of years. The reason I bring that up is because, to break down the simple core reason why Iraq is just such a disaster is actually because of the fact that the country formerly existed under the Ottoman Empire for a very long time. When the Ottoman Empire dissolved, these are basically borders that were drawn. And so you were dealing with a bunch of warring tribes, a bunch of ethnic groups that for a long time hated each other. Saddam Hussein basically was the one keeping them all in check, stopping them from fighting. And the moment that power vacuum was gone, you deal with civil war in the country. But it's worth noting that Persia is not that, right? It's not sort of this fake artificial country that only popped up in the post-war period. No, Persia's existed for thousands of years. Persia, unlike Iraq, unlike Syria, unlike Lebanon, unlike all of those places, was not a former territory of the Ottoman Empire. It's dealt with governments before. It had a stable and functional government long before. It has a past that it can draw back on. It has sort of a way you could see it going if the current government is toppled. It historically, by the way, has been a functional place, right? We're not talking about Somalia or some part of the world where it just always dealt with civil war. That's not Persia. So it's only a question of, well, if this current government is taken out, if it's put aside, I'm not saying that everything would be perfect. Certainly revolutions are chaotic. You could see civil strife. But I also think it's not necessarily likely that we deal with the same situation that we did in Iraq, especially, by the way, given the fact that, as I said, it doesn't appear like the U.S. plan is a full-scale invasion, total boots on the ground. Who knows? You might send a Delta Force or something like that, but at this time doesn't appear to be what we're doing there. And so, that's sort of my breakdown of the situation. Again, there is a reason to do it. I see the argument for it. There are concerns to be had about it. And sure, I mean, when you campaign on, no new wars, then certainly if you get yourself trapped in a protracted war because it sort of went wrong, then that's a problem. And that's something that Trump's going to have to take accountability for. At the same time, I'm not here to be hysterical about it, right? It's going to have to be a thing of we see what happens. I think that You know, if we manage to get this done as quickly as possible, that's sort of the issue with America, right? When our wars go too long, that's when they become unpopular. That's when they become costly. It's just very important right now that this gets done quickly and is done successfully. And in that case, Trump's going to look like a genius.
Vance telling the Washington Post Thursday there is no chance any strikes would lead to a drawn-out war. He said such strikes would be a deterrent to prevent Iran from pursuing a nuclear weapon, calling himself and President Trump skeptics on foreign military intervention.
So I guess you could say that we're just hoping this looks a lot more like Gulf War I than Gulf War II. That it looks more like Operation Just Cause and the U.S. intervention in Panama than it does, say, the Vietnam War, right? But I also think we should dispel the myth that America has never had successful military interventions. Actually, there's been a ton. We just don't talk about them a lot because they were over that quickly. And so if that ends up happening here in Iran, then I think Trump will be heavily vindicated. And again, sort of given the current circumstance, right? The fact that our military is probably technologically way ahead of everyone else at this moment in time, right? At this year and this decade. And given the fact the Iranian government clearly is already sort of collapsing, I think there's grounds for optimism that this ends up a lot more like, you know, Gulf War I or Operation Just Cause. But we're going to have to see, right? We're going to have to wait and see what happens. And that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. God bless and peace. And by the way, praying for the safety of all of our troops in the Middle East and across the world right now. All right, see you guys later.